Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, another Tyranid Learning Curve for you, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the Hive Tyrant, the first of the HQ choices. Now it's fair to say I nearly split this video into two, looking at the winged Hive Tyrant and the foot Hive Tyrant, but although it seems like two units, effectively it is one unit, so I'm going to keep it all together. However, the next two videos coming up, which will be on the Swarm Lord and the Hive Tyrant Guard, are going to be sort of interlinked with this video as well, so it's almost like a little mini-series within the learning curve. So yeah, first of all I'm going to convert one of these Flyrants into a foot Hive Tyrant, just because we're going to be talking about both, so let me just quickly do that for you. So we've got this guy here, that one there. Now obviously these are the older models, I think the 3rd edition. They're a bit smaller than the new ones, but I still think they look pretty cool. Okay, so let's have a look at these. So the base price is 165 points, which will buy you a Flyrant with 2 sets of Scything Talons. We're looking at a weapon skill 8, ballistic skill 4, strength 6 and toughness 6 with 4 wounds, initiative 5, 4 attacks, leadership 10 and a 3+ save. Now, yes, it's a little bit low on wounds, arguably, with just the 4 wounds compared to some of the other Gribblies that we've got, but, you know, we just have to live with that. As you would expect, they are Synapse creatures, and of course they have Shadow of the Warp. Now, they're also Psychers, with a mastery level of 2, and they use powers from the Hive Mind. Now we're going to look at powers from the Hive Mind probably in a separate video, but they are very useful powers which can complement these guys here very well indeed. So obviously with the wing option you're looking at a flying monstrous creature stats, and this is just going to be a standard monstrous creature. Let's have a look at the Flyrant as it's commonly known first. So yeah, flying monstrous creature which gives you fantastic movement. Starting on the table, you obviously have to be on foot, so you're looking to hide him, get him at least in cover. Especially if you don't have first turn. Of course, if you have first turn, you're going to be able to fly straight in the air. There is the option of reserving him, bringing him on a bit later, but ideally you want him, you know, on the table at the beginning if you can. Now, of course, it means he's got great movement, 12 inches to 24 inches, and that's the pivotal thing about the Flyrant, really. He has fantastic range, fantastic movement, and you can see on him I've got my converted twin-linked Devourers, which I think is the weapon of choice on these guys. Although it's only 18-inch gun, you've got the movement with him to get him in range, and you know, taking 2 sets of these guns means that you've got 12 shots, which will be twin-linked, hitting on 3s, but twin-linked, and strength 6. Fantastic gun. AP 0, okay, but fantastic for taking out infantry, and combined with the movement, fantastic for getting side armour of vehicles. And even if you only get to a side armour of a 12, it's still pretty easy to glance a vehicle to death with these guys. So great for infantry, great for light vehicles. They have the movement, they've got the psychic power, they've got the synapse ability, they're in the air so they're difficult to hit. All round great units, really, to be fair. Obviously taking them with the wings are going to cost you 35 points, so it will beef up the price. The Devourers are 15 points each, so that's another 30 points. So it's, you know, it's a fair amount of points, but I think looking at it with the wings and what they can do, it's a sound investment. And although one of these units will work pretty well, 2 in an army works incredibly well. Of course, people are looking to take more than that. I think Aceface was talking about having 5 Flyrants in one of his lists. Yeah, but I generally take 2 because that's the only amount of models that I have. So, what else can we give him out of all the stats? I suppose that the main one potentially you could take is Hive Commander, which is 20 points, which lets one of your troop units flank. And that is per Flyrant. So if you had 2 Flyrants with 2 Hive Commanders, then 2 units can flank. Now that used to be slightly better when you could assault coming off from reserve and flanking and then assault, which you can't do now, but still it does give you the option. Potentially units that you may want to flank potentially could be a Tervigon, a troops Tervigon, you know. So it does give you the option, but I don't tend to take that, to be fair, not unless I specifically need to do that in my army. I tend to just use them base, so that's basically taking the wings and then the 2 sets of Devourers, and combined with the psychic powers, that's a great unit. So highly recommended. Right there. Now the disadvantage of being in the air is when you land you have to wait 1 turn before you can assault, so that is just something to bear in mind. You can't be flying in the air, land and then assault, but primarily you're going to be using the guns, and you're just going to be flying around shooting. You'll probably be going to be landing end game. Maybe if you find a unit that's a bit isolated, you might be able to land next to it and then, you know, wait a turn and assault the next turn. You might want to be landing to get line breaker, you know, and potentially objectives at the end. But primarily he's going to be flying around for most of the game. So yeah, let's put him to one side and look at a foot tyrant, the Hive Tyrant on foot. So yeah, I don't tend to use this guy that much. I have used him. As I said, he comes based with Scything Talons, and primarily if you're going to be taking him on foot, you're going to be probably looking at using him as an assault creature, because if you're going to use him as a shooting base, then, you know, why wouldn't you take the Flyrant? So I wouldn't see anyone really giving the gun options to this guy. Either keep with your Scything Talons, keep him cheap, and take advantage of the +1 attack for 2 weapons. Failing that, you could... I mean, if you want to take a gun, then one option would be to give him the Lash Whip and Bone Sword option, which does give him +3 initiative 5 anyway, but +3 initiative, that's pretty good. And then your Bone Sword, which gives him the instant death rule on 6s. And that makes way for you to take a gun option. So you arguably could take a gun option, but you wouldn't be putting Twin Link Devourers on there because they just don't have the range. 18 inches, remember. So you could maybe go for a Heavy Venom Cannon or a Stranglethorn Cannon. Of the 2, the Stranglethorn Cannon is the one to go for, in my opinion. It's a bit cheaper, 15 points. It's a large blast. More importantly, it's a pinning weapon. And, you know, that's very useful. Being able to pin units for Tyranids is incredibly useful. If you're going to be using as an assault creature, then maybe Toxin Sacs, Poison, arguably can be quite useful. We haven't talked about regeneration actually on the Flyrant either, but regeneration is certainly an option. 4 wounds, if you do take a wound in the air and you're not grounded and assaulted and killed, then having that regeneration ability actually is pretty useful. But once again, 30 points. It's pretty expensive, so if you've got it to spare, it could be useful. I think we're going to take time out to make a whole video on regeneration at some point. You do have the acid blood and adrenal gland special rules as well. Again, I don't tend to take those. And Hive Commander, once again, pretty useful. Old Adversary is probably what you're going to be taking, the main upgrade on this guy, because he will let you reroll or fail to hit and wound rolls in close combat. Now it is in close combat only. But if you're going to be using him as a close combat creature, then for 15 points, that's probably the main thing that you're going to be taking out of all of the options. Now, going back to the gun options, rather than the Stranglethorn cannon or the heavy venom cannon, you could well take the miasma cannon. It's 25 points, obviously only one per army, but 36-inch with a poisonous blast that's on a 2+. Or you can take that as a template as well, a poisoned 2+ template. So that could be an option, but personally I tend to keep him as cheap as possible, either with dual scything talons or maybe the lash whip bone sword option. And the main reason for that is, although he has a 3+ save, he only has that 4 wound ability, and what we're going to be looking at later in this little mini series is the Hive Tyrant guard, which is probably what you're going to need with this walking tyrant. And the guard effectively giving him some extra wounds and making him more viable to walk across the table, but those guards are pretty expensive, so that's why I suggest you keep him much cheaper, because you're going to need points to put the guard with him to keep him survived, keep him alive. Now there is another little option which is down to the Tyrannocyte being introduced to Tyranids, and that's to put him in a Tyrannocyte into a drop pod and drop pod him in. Fairly viable. Again, you still have to remember that he only has 4 wounds with a 3+ save. Now it is such a shame that the extended carapace, I think it was called, where we could make him have a 2+ save, has gone, because a 2+ save on this guy would make him actually very viable to walking across the table, a lot more viable than a 3+ save. You know, missile launchers and stuff are going to really hurt you. So yeah, you're really going to probably need to have the guard with him if you're going to walk him across the table. I think ultimately what I'm saying is that a walking tyrant is definitely not unusable. It is usable, you know, either with a pod, but that means you're going to be spending at least 75 points on the pod, or either with tyrant guard, which you're going to be spending the points on the guard, which we're going to look at soon. So it makes him pretty expensive, and when you look at the points invested and how much a winged Hive Tyrant costs you, the winged Hive Tyrant is such a fantastic option that I would say almost 10 times out of 10 you're going to be taking the Flyrant, especially if you're looking at the more competitive side of things. And if you're looking at more fun side of things, then yeah, you know, why not take a Hive Tyrant, especially if you're doing like a more Nidzilla type list where you're going to have lots of other monstrous creatures, gives your opponent lots of other targets to think about. You know, walking a Hive Tyrant across without the bodyguards, with let's say 3 Trigons, some Carnifexes, you know, that type of thing, it will give your opponent things to think about, and you may not necessarily be putting all of those missiles, etc., into your foot tyrant. So yeah, lots of things to think about. As I said, the Flyrant is the main option, but the Hive Tyrant, as it stands, is still pretty viable, but not necessarily the most competitive way to play the unit. Okay, so that's it for this video. It's gone on fairly long, but as I said, we're almost covering 2 units. Next up, we're going to look at the Swarm Lord, and then we're going to look at those Hive Tyrant Guard that I was just talking about. Thanks for watching.